Welcome to a conversation on human potential. My name is Nancy Michieli, and I am here with Lianne Bridges to talk about how human potential can impact our lives, can improve our work. I am a leadership communication coach helping corporations transform confusion into clarity so that you can perform and have a competitive advantage. And Lianne, I'm going to hand it over to you so you can share with everybody what you do.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'm Lianne Bridges, and I'm the founder of Designing Transformation. We really focus on helping people, business owners, leaders transform their lives, their work, and their leadership so that they can really reach their greatest potential in their life and their work and have a great impact. So this topic of human potential is something that I love and near and dear to my heart as well. So I'm really excited about this conversation, Nancy.
So, Leanne, maybe we can start off with just kind of what is your definition of human potential?
Oh, that's a great one. I think that all of us are continually evolving. I think one of the challenges that we are faced with when we want to make a shift or a change is we think that something's wrong with us, something's broken
Mhm.
with us, as opposed to we're just like human beings that are continually evolving and opening up like a lotus. And so when we can start to open up the potential, the different possibilities of how we can have more passion in our life, have a sense of more meaning and purpose, where we have lots more prosperity in all types of forms, where we have peace, sense of balance, where we have a connection to others, to within ourselves, our own intuition and our wisdom. When we're living from those perspectives, I believe we're really living a lot more of our potential. But it's a path and a journey, I believe, rather than a destination. How about
Yeah.
yourself?
So for me, I think of human potential in relation to the workplace because that's where I do a great deal of my work. And what I personally believe is that everyone has this incredible strength and capability within them. And as leaders, as people in management, our job is to unlock that potential in them so that they can grow and that you can create amazing teams. And when you allow people that freedom to unlock that human potential, it's amazing what ideas, what creativity, what things can actually happen within the workplace as people move forward. So that's
Absolutely.
essentially my
And
thought.
what I love too is how all of the places, the home place, the workplace,
Mhm.
leadership, they're all connected to each other. And so when you improve something in your workplace, it actually spills over to your home life and your relationships. When you improve, hopefully we'll talk about your expertise in communication. When you improve your
Mhm.
communication in the workplace, imagine it impacts your communication in the home and your relationships. And same when you have more passion and sense of purpose in the work that you're doing, you find you have more energy at home. You're not like completely depleted at the end of the day. So these
Mhm.
aspects of the human potential are all like, again, like a flower, one connects to the other and
It
and
does.
supports or diminishes the other.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's beautiful when you can start to figure that out, right? Because the reality, in my view, that work-life balance is really about trying to figure out how work can amplify things in your life and how things in your life can amplify things at work.
Mhm.
And if we are not living to our true potential and living in a state of stress, it really impacts everything that we do. It impacts how we show up to the world in all parts of our life. And so being able to understand that and live that and breathe that is really important.
Oh, for
Mhm.
sure. I think it's absolutely critical. And I believe that companies are starting to recognize some of these things more and more. And when we
Yeah.
talk about leadership when I was starting my career was much more about, how do you build teams? How do what do cohesive teams look like? How do you get people
Mhm.
bonding and so forth in teams, which is obviously really important, and the culture and so forth. But what's new and really relates to your area in communication and mine is around what we call self-leadership. It's,
Mhm.
starting from within to be that person that is much more wholly realized. Again, we may not ever get to a complete realization in our life, but as we grow, even if we learn one thing about how to be, let's say, a little bit more self-aware, just by being more self-aware, you're creating an impact for others to see. You may even speak about it. That helps you become a better leader as well, and helps you in your communication. It helps you in your reaction. And that whole area of human potential, the idea of self leadership or self mastery, is something that I'm very keen. And I'd love to hear from you about how communication fits in that, and the model that you use to
Yeah.
help people to really, from the inner thoughts and emotions out to the outer
Emotions.
communication in teams.
So there's a lot going on with communication. And so I utilize a tool called the process communication model, which was developed by psychologist Dr. Taby Kaler in collaboration with NASA. And one of the first things we do in the PCM model is help get people aware of their personality style. And unlike other communication models, we describe that you have all of the personality types in you at different strengths. And so one of them is your most natural form of communicating. The other, which may be the same or may be different, is what motivates you. But under all of this is the language that we say to ourselves, right? And becoming fully aware of what are the patterns in the words and the communication that we say to ourselves that sometimes, unfortunately, lead to our self sabotage and the things that hold us back from stepping into that potential that we have.
That's great. Now, if I can just lead on to that idea of
Yeah.
pattern and our pattern of communicating and our style. And that's some of the work I do in the self leadership side of things is that, our patterns of thinking, our belief systems, belief is just a
Mhm.
thought we keep thinking over and over to the point that it kind of
Exactly.
solidifies within us, right? And it drives our behaviors, including our communication. And to some of the work that is coming on board more and more in companies in particular is what is at the root of that pattern. We learn
Mhm.
things from when we're a child, we learn, from our parents, from our schools, from our community, that type of thing. There can be a pattern of thinking, I'm not good enough, not proper boundaries, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, people pleasing, there's so many of
Yeah.
those that
Yeah.
if we can get to, they just didn't happen overnight. They happened over a long period of time. And when we can start to kind of decouple that and see where they come from, we can start to heal them. And when we heal
Mhm.
them, then we can strengthen our inner mastery, and moving past these things that really get in the way. And then I would imagine impact the communication that we have too. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So in a PCM, when Dr. Taby Kaler was doing his research, he actually was studying something and developed this concept called mini scripts. And these mini scripts he noticed were the patterns that people would go into when they started to move into stress.
Mm.
And what he was then able to do is pay attention to these. I think there's eight total, there's eight patterns in the mini scripts that relate to six different personality styles. And what he was able to do was then say, you know what, with these patterns, when you can become aware of these patterns, then you can start to put things into your day to help manage and deal with the stress and the underlying emotion that allows you to step back into the positive and great place that you can show up. And so I thought it was really interesting because earlier before we got on, right, you asked me about my background in RTT. And so, as much as I started as an engineer, I am fascinated with hypnosis. I'm fascinated with our mind and what it possibly can do. And in the RTT world, we often learned this concept of I am not enough. And so the I am not enough comes in relation to what we call a personality type of someone who's intended to be a pleaser. So they have this desire to please others. And the script and what's going on in their head, right, is that I am trying to be enough for you. I'm trying to please you as the script. But I've had other clients who would be like, that doesn't really resonate with me. And it wasn't until I learned PCM that I actually learned the other scripts. And so the script that I have is I need to be perfect for others. I need to
Mm-hmm.
show up perfectly, right? That whole concept of perfectionism. And so what it turns out is I have this pattern in my mind that I use in my language that says, until I've said things perfectly or until I've done things perfectly, I can't move forward. And so, what I found really fascinating, and that is around being worthwhile. So, instead of saying the words, I'm not enough, I am worthwhile. And the other ones are about being strong, about trying hard, about hurrying up. And so, it's really interesting once I learned Taby's version of all of these 6 different scripts that we have as these patterns in our head, and I teach it to people, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can see that in myself," or "Oh my gosh, I can see that in somebody else that I'm working with." So now I know how to help amplify what's in them. Hmm.
That's really
Yeah,
fascinating. And it's like you can read underneath the script, right? You're reading what is it that they're trying to project out there and where are their hurt parts that you might want to, try to soothe and be compassionate with and
exactly.
understand a little bit more. One of the things, how I relate to that, I don't know those scripts, and I think it would be super,
Mm,
super valuable to understand them better. I call a lot of times when I'm working coaching with people, it's like I go zero in on what is the story you're telling yourself that's stopping
mhm.
you, and they'll inevitably be something that's like somebody. It's one of my clients said to me their family members moved out west, their children moved out west, and they said. I don't want to move out there because then I'll be living their life. And I heard her say it maybe 3 or 4 times. And I
Mm,
realized that that's the story she's telling herself. Is that true? Do we even know that to be true? And by
yeah.
telling yourself that story over and over, how is it stopping you from all possibilities that you could be
Great.
living life? And so
Hmm.
these stories, and so the scripts is a little bit different because it's really that rooted pattern. But the stories we
Yeah.
tell ourselves, I think, are linked to some of those scripts. And maybe that's where your RTT kind of comes in. And maybe you can explain a bit more of RTT to people because not everyone would know what that is, I don't think. And I think it's
Yeah. So RTT is a form of hypnosis. So I'm trained in both classical hypnosis and then I upgraded my skills to RTT. And RTT uses this concept of looking at the scripts that we have built in our life and then in the hypnotic state, how to actually rewrite those scripts. And one of the benefits of doing this in the hypnotic state, or whether you do it in a meditative state, is that the more you can visualize, practice rewiring those statements in your mind. There's a law called Hebb's law, right? What wires together fires together. And this concept is that our brain creates synapses, and I'm now getting into really technical terms, right? But it creates links or roads in our brain that when we repeat that pattern in our head over and over and over again, and in a hypnotic state, what's amazing is I can get you to visualize like you're actually living it and experiencing it in the safe comfort of your home, the new script that you want to have. And we can start to undo the old script. And so RTT allows us to do It's called Rapid Transformational Therapy. And the intention is in the hypnotic state for you to experience this change of mindset. And as I think about that, my brother during COVID ended up requiring to have brain surgery. And it was fascinating because during brain surgery and while his brain was in this state that is really susceptible, we were able to, he was able to experience a decoding of some negative behaviors that he was going through. And he came out of the surgery with these really incredible, more positive, more behaviors. And it was essentially like watching him go through hypnotic state, but in like a surgical plan. So it's amazing how the brain can change. But whether you use visualization practice, whether you use hypnosis practice, whether you use meditative practice, getting yourself into practicing what it is that you want. And you want to practice it not just in words, but feel all of the emotions that you want to have at the same time as you practice it, and you can transform yourself quicker.
That's amazing. And I'm curious about work. I can picture you working individually with people. Can you work in a whole group at a time, or you have to work one-on-one with each person? I imagine with RTT, right?
So hypnosis, or RTT, I typically do one-on-one activities. When I do PCM, I worked with a team of 15 people the other day. And that is really great because I can have them separate in the room based on their personality types and then start to practice how to converse in the way the other person wants to hear it. And PCM really dives into communication, looking at not just what we say, but how we say it. So we talk about gesture, postures, facial expressions, tone, and then words. And so teaching people how to kind of play those parts is really fun to do in a team type environment.
Great, yeah. And I find when we speak, the power of our words, the power of our expressions. When my husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer and I had a 5 and a 7-year-old, my whole life was like kind of coming apart. I just kept intuitively hearing the song Smile, even though your heart is breaking. And I found it a very, very powerful thing to work through because it stopped me from like falling into victimhood. And, it's that kind of, fake it till you make it kind of thing, which can be, the other side where you just put on a mask and you're not being authentic. But this really was, I was feeling if I smile and change my face, my mood goes with it. And I was able to, that was one thing that really helped me through a very traumatic time in my life, and to constantly kind of find what is the purpose in the challenge we're going through at the same time by combining those two elements. But also, like you said, being able to feel the emotion too. It's not about whitewashing and always saying, okay, I'm smiling, everything's happy. It's being able to feel the grief and the sadness or whatever trauma that you're going through as well, I think is really important.
And I feel that one thing that people often don't allow themselves is the opportunity to feel that negative emotion, right? We try and push it away. And one of the things in the PCM model is there's a negative emotion associated that trying to deal with. So the perfectionist is actually trying to deal typically with this negative emotion of loss. And it could be loss of a job opportunity. It could be loss of a relationship. It could be loss of money. It could be loss of time, whatever that loss is.
Yeah.
But it's allowing yourself to feel that, right? It's okay to be sad. And even anger is appropriate if you can do it there's a way to do it appropriately, but allowing yourself just to kind of get through that emotion so that you can move back into the positive emotion. One of the things that I liked what you just said is you talked about music as being, right, that song kept coming to you. I personally think music is one of the most powerful tools that we have to help boost our mood, to help us with different experiences. I'm curious, have you ever used music in any of the retreats you do, in any of the work that you do to help set a tone or a feeling or emotion?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's interesting because my late husband was, a armchair musician or sideline musician. That wasn't his
Mhm.
first work, but when he passed away, and then I started writing my book, music kept coming through to me in so many ways. It was like his way to connect with me,
Mm.
and it was when I would sit down to write, I'd be saying, okay, what is this chapter or the scene? What is it that I want to try to convey? And a song would pop in my mind immediately, and it would just be amazing how, like a metaphor, it was able to encapsulate the whole feeling without a lot of words and description and so forth. So I would like to use it a lot more in my work, actually. But what I tend to use more is kind of like more yoga type music, all that kind of
Mm.
thing, guided
Yeah.
meditations and so forth. So it's yeah. How about yourself? Do you use music?
I don't use music as much as I would like, but that being said, I do love it. And one of the things I have started to do is even before I get on one of these
Songs.
yeah, recordings that I'm doing, or I am meeting with a client, I actually put a couple pieces of my favorite piece of music on to help boost the energy in me to create that excitement because I know I feel better with
Mm-hmm.
music going on, with music in the background, and even when I'm trying to do something tough, having some music or have some sound
Mm-hmm.
in the background playing just really kind of amplifies the energy in me.
I
Mhm.
do the exact same. And when I meditate a lot as well, it's, kind of what I would call
Yeah.
often more spa music or different binary beats or those kind of things that help me. I have it on all the time when I'm working, to help me
Ah,
just be in that kind of more of a mode and stuff.
a
It's,
mode.
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm curious too about the personality types that you spoke about before too, the six
Mm.
personality types. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. So in the process communication model, KB defined six personality types, and they've actually changed names. So this is like an older version
Okay.
of them, and it's what I find is really interesting. Some of the older names, they've changed them to be kind of more politically correct, of course, and more. So, for example, one of the personality types is called thinker, and it used to historically be called the workaholic. And so we can all
Yeah.
relate to that term, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so somebody with the thinker base personality type will see the world through logic, order. Their communication style is typically facts, data, that type of logic perspective. From if it is in your phase, it has a tendency to lead to potentially the distress pattern of over controlling and the micromanaging. And I actually did. I just posted a YouTube video on that from the perspective of the micromanager, but it can lead to that as the distress behavior. And somebody with that phase generally needs appreciation of the effort of work that they're doing. The next personality type in it, and people will be like, oh, I see all of these in me. You will. You have all of them in you. You're not just like one personality type. The next one is called persister, and persister sees the world through opinions and beliefs. And so when somebody who speaks using the persister language patterns, they'll say, in my opinion, or I believe, right? There's very good relationship to to judgment and justice and opinions. If somebody has this in their phase, when they are in stress, they will have a tendency to crusade or push beliefs and values.
We've
As
seen a lot of that
well,
over the last 3 years.
yeah, exactly, right? COVID
We've
has
been
brought
put
back
under
the
so much stress, and we all crusading on different formats in different ways.
exactly, right? And it's interesting because COVID has definitely brought out the distress patterns in us.
Yes.
Those people typically need just acknowledgement of their convictions is really what they need. And their work is related to the value of what that work brings to the world.
Mm.
The next is harmonizer. This is actually the biggest one in the population. And people with harmonizers see things through emotions and feelings. And their language is, their body posture is softer, their language is softer, right? They typically will use words like, I appreciate, I care, I feel in their language patterns. If somebody has this as their distress pattern, this is the please you distress pattern, right? And will often start making mistakes unconsciously and play the victim, right?
Mm.
Pull that criticism. It's all my fault. I'm so sorry, right? That over apologetic perspective. The next is imaginer. And I'm finding a lot of people struggling with this personality type. And I go back because I had a boss at one point. I wish I had known this years ago. Who had the imaginer type. And imaginer as a base communication means that they see the world through reflection. And so they are typically the most introverted of all of the personality types. And when you ask a question, you may not get a response for minutes or like a couple days, and then they'll go back because their mind is processing so many ideas and thoughts. I describe them like a duck on the water. Their feet are moving and you can't see it, and the top is really, really calm.
Very
When
cool.
somebody has this as their phase or distress pattern, they go into withdrawal. And so they start to retreat and withdraw because their need in life, their psychological need is around having solitude and time to process what is going on in their mind. So often leadership roles will struggle with this personality type because they'll ask a question. They'll be like, why am I not getting a response? And so I say, if you've got somebody who has this personality type, go ask them a question and give them like a day to come back. Or if you've got a meeting where you need to brainstorm, give them the topics so that they can pre-think and show up to the meeting successfully. The next personality type is the one that my husband has. And it is called the rebel personality type. And this personality type is big and silly, and they like all of their emotions are out. It's about fun, spontaneity, creativity. And
Lucky
when
you.
this person
Being a husband like that. Lucky you.
he brings a lot of joy into my day.
Yeah.
The challenge with this personality type is that when they are in distress, they get into this try hard cycle, and they get stuck in this, it's too much effort. And so my husband does this thing that I call poking the bear. He'll just like play games with me to see if he can get a reaction. And their need is actually contact, right? Their need. And so this personality type in distress is where you'll see blaming start to happen.
Mm.
It's somebody else's fault that I didn't get my work done.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last personality type is called the promoter. And the promoter is the smallest one in the percentages. And the promoter type is all about getting into action. So they're like, let's do it now, right? They're action driven, keep moving on things. Their language pattern is very direct. And so this can be very off-putting to some people, even though they have no intention to be inappropriate. But it'll be like, get me the report by 5, right? There'll be no like softness to it. It just is very direct in giving directions. And they see the world through action, just like they're like the Nike commercial, right? Let's just do it.
I know someone exactly like this. I won't say who it is in case he watches this, but it's amazing how when you start to understand this, how it can
Yeah,
really help you to see deeper, right? Yeah.
exactly. So now you can start to, what I love about this process is you can start to be like, oh, that's that person's communication style. It's not about me, right? So
Hmm.
at the
Yes.
start of this,
Take
you
it
talked
personally.
about this concept of how we kind of put these internal blames on ourselves and these internal, and when you learn PCM and you learn and become aware of your communication style, and you can start to decode the communication style in others, you can start to be like, take the weight off that there's a fault between either person, right? And in PCM, we say communication is effective if we are in the I'm okay, you're okay state.
Hmm.
And so it's really important to be able to be aware of our distress patterns and then be able to apply it and allow ourselves to be able to naturally adapt to all of the personality types, which is why they're all within us.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I love it because the way you described it, it's like these communication styles are kind of like an archetype for each of us, and we can put
Mm-hmm.
them, put it on and off, kind of depending, but we'll tend towards a certain archetype, and that archetype is a reflection of deep within us, right? Of our,
Yes.
because you said in each one, what is the need? Ultimately of
Mm-hmm.
that type, and what is the distress pattern. I really love like
Yeah.
being able to see those kind of things. So it's the light and the shadow of
Yeah.
that pattern, right? And I
Exactly.
imagine if we go deeper and if you did the hypnosis and RTT on it, you'd probably see where that comes from, how that patterning started in a lifetime,
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think I'm number one, the thinker side of things. I
The
have to
thinker.
say the one that
I think you
gets
are
to
too.
see the most. And controlling. And what is the need of the thinker? What is the need?
The need of the thinker is recognition of effort
Yeah.
and time structure.
Yeah. Exactly.
So we want to be acknowledged for the work that we're putting in, the amount of hours, the amount of effort
Yeah.
that we're doing to bring something to life, right?
Yeah.
And what I love about this process is when a leader learns it, or even a parent learns it, they
Parenting,
can
that's
now be
key.
like,
That's key too, right?
I can,
Parenting.
huh? Yeah,
Parenting
I
is
can
really important.
acknowledge what it is that the other person needs. And
Hmm.
when you can start to acknowledge the other person's needs from the way they see the world as instead of how you see the world, oh my gosh, like we can do all kinds of things. I had a young woman, the just before Christmas, she was getting the training from somebody I helped get their certification. And she said to me, Nancy, it's the first time I actually know myself and don't feel bad for who I am.
Mm.
And she then went on to say that I see, and she has like rebel as one of her base, right? So she's like, I was always in trouble in school. I was always like constantly being criticized for this creativity, fun, spontaneous person. And she says, I now see it in my daughter, that same thing. And she said, I now can go advocate for my daughter because I know what she needs. I know why this is happening. And I know the language pattern to help adjust to the teacher and understand how the teacher sees the world so that we can create this better relationship between the teacher and my daughter. And I thought,
Mm.
that to me, if that was like to me the big thing that I accomplished last year was training somebody who taught this to someone else so that they can go advocate for their daughter in the school system.
I think that's really powerful. And it comes back to what we were saying at the beginning about the human
Mm-hmm.
potential. You work on one area and it impacts other areas. It has, and we don't even have maybe that as our intention or whatever, but it's really, really powerful.
It
And
is.
I think, for me, one of my big areas of passion and purpose is helping people figure out and step into what their passion and purpose is.
Mm-hmm.
And this element of self leadership, alignment, communicating, understanding our communication types and so forth is really critical, because as soon as someone starts to imagine, what is it that I want to do? Here I am right now. I'd like to do
Mhm.
more, what, creativity, art, helping people, healing, whatever it might be. Immediately they stop, because they'll go into more of that shadow side, or the distress side, or the
Exactly.
of that style. It's not possible. It's
Mhm.
going to be too much work, blaming, all the things like that. So you can't even get into the passion and purpose and step into that, or even into thinking what's possible, when you're stuck in the other. So it's so, so important that we do the work on ourselves. I kind of see it like, we're here and we want to get over here to this
Yeah.
newer version of ourselves. Again, not that we're broken, just this new imagining. We can't from the same place we are. We
Right.
have to change ourselves. We have to change how we think, how we react, how we speak. And again, understanding what our strengths are, what our type is. So leveraging the type, as we know those different types, there's the strength of them, right? There's the gifts within them.
Yeah.
It's the need within them. And to be able to leverage them, like when you're talking about your husband, I was laughing because my husband was a bit like that too. And, I just love that. Like, especially in men, there's so much of that joyous, fun, loving and stuff. Like, let's leverage that more in the workplace. Right? Like when I
Exactly.
get into
Yeah.
Zoom calls and everyone's like this, it's
Mhm.
like, come on, let's have fun, joyful.
Or
Leverage all of
exactly.
them, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, even in Zoom calls, right, where we put all the screens off and we don't actually get to see people,
I know.
we are social beings, right?
I
And
know.
so connecting, even the introverts are social beings, and
Yes.
is what I discovered in this process. And what I fell in love with is really this ability on how it can apply to so many lives in helping us achieve the goals that we want, helping us achieve. And it helps us kind of get clear on maybe who should be on our team, right?
Hmm.
Who we want to engage with more, because what we notice in PCM is that certain people will resonate with us more than other people. And it is okay, right? It is okay to do that.
Yes.
The reason I discovered this process is kind of funny, is I had this initial desire to work with women, and you do a lot of your work with women.
Yes.
And I was like, why is it that I cannot communicate well with women? And so what I suspect is your harmonizer floor is very strong within you. And for me, my harmonizer floor is like not existent. Um, and so when I was trying to do my communication, I was like, why is it that I can't connect as well with women, where I can connect easily with men? And it's really because of how I naturally communicate. Now,
As an
because of this,
engineer, not surprising, right?
exactly, right? As an engineer, it makes a lot of sense. But an engineer who also studies hypnosis
Yeah.
and communication. Um, but it's interesting because it was okay not to be able to be great in all women based organizations, but
Yes.
because I've learned to adapt, I've learned why, and I've learned to control that micromanaging need in me, I can now easily adapt to women. I can have better conversations with women. And so I was able to develop and grow from that perspective. And I was like, oh, this is really cool.
Oh, I love that. I think I really can relate to what you're saying, because I'm probably a lot more like you than, and especially the way I was, a lot less the harmonizing. And
Yeah.
what I started to realize, and now as you're explaining it, kind of the more the mechanics of it, is that
Mhm.
I was drawn to uh, some of the opposites of me. So that, I
Yeah.
think there's a journey in all of us, and talking about human potential, journey towards wholeness. What we're missing
Mm.
in ourselves, we're attracting from others sometimes. And sometimes
Yeah.
it repels
Yeah.
us because it's too foreign, right? We're maybe not ready.
Yeah.
But that harmonizer, I have like a colleague, I do retreats with women and in
Hmm.
workshops and women's circles and so forth. And she's much more the harmonizer. And she has taught me a lot more of that. And she'll say I've taught her a lot more of the thinker side, the structure
Right.
and so forth. But she's allowed me to let go when things don't work out, and I bring kind of the container in for all of her like woo ideas and stuff. And
Let's
we
put a
work
plan together
so
around it.
well together. Like it's just
Yeah.
amazing. And that's been the foundation for a great part of my success in my career is that relationship and that connection. Because I've met so many women of all sorts, whether they're in companies, whether they're not, that then
Right.
come to me and work, one-on-one or take programs or bring me into their
Yeah.
companies or whatever. So yeah, I think that being able to see where we want to attract people and depending on what it is, whether it's a work or a friendship or whatever, right? That's super, super powerful. I love it.
Um, what I love about what you just said is this connection of being able to recognize the strengths in each of
Mm-hmm.
you,
Yeah.
right? Recognize, and that's what human potential is, right? Recognizing the strengths in each of you and using it to help each other be more
Yeah.
successful.
Yes.
And when you can do that, and that's what I believe leadership is about, is recognizing those strengths in other people. That's what being a great parent is about, recognizing the strengths in your children or your partner, right? Being great friends, whatever it is, it's being able to find those strengths in each other and using those to amplify both of you to the best human potential there
Yeah.
is.
I love
So,
that.
yeah.
I love that. And I
Mhm.
would say one other thing before we kind of get off is this idea of leadership, because you tapped into it when you talked about parenting, relationships,
Mhm.
leading. And I think we have, when we hear the word, and words are so important, leader, we think of
Yeah,
somebody who has a rank and a position and people reporting and a portfolio.
right.
And I know, and I think more and more people are recognizing leadership is part of each of our human potential. Each one of us is a
Mhm.
leader. If we're just leading in our life, in our families, in our communities, in our work, or maybe in society at large, it doesn't matter. All of those, it's that leadership, being able to do all that self leadership, the work we do on
Mhm.
ourselves, to be our greatest potential,
Yeah,
ultimately is to be able then to shine it out in the world. And just as a mere example, as then actually doing things that help others through that leadership. And I think that leadership part is what kind of ties the whole thing of the human potential for me together. So we recognize when we work on one part of our leadership as a parent, then it
yeah,
helps us in our society or work or
exactly.
whatever, right? So yeah, I think it's
Exactly.
really cool.
Mhm. Well, Leanne, this has been so wonderful chatting
Yeah.
with you. I look forward, we're going to have to do this again,
Yes,
definitely.
for sure. I'd love
um,
to.
yeah, but before we go, how do people get a hold of you so that they can learn to work with you in the future?
Awesome. Thanks for asking. It's really the best place is my website. It leads you to all things me. It's called designingtransformation.com. That's
Wonderful.
designingtransformation.com. And yeah, and on there, you can actually join my Human Potential Network, which offers a whole library of free resources and also a monthly newsletter where, again, is packed with information, articles, and so forth. So if you're interested, please reach out to me. That'd be awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nancy. What
Fantastic.
about yourself for my
I
people that
well,
are on
I'm
my
going to
network? Yeah.
I'm going to definitely sign up for your human potential newsletter and toolkit because I think that's fantastic. For myself, it's also go directly to my website, nancymichelicoaching.com. And what I encourage you to do or invite you to do is join me for an impact and influence strategy call. So if you are having a communication issue, may it be someone at work, may it be someone at home, book that call and I will give you 3 powerful tips to help you improve that communication and connection with that person. So yeah,
Nice.
I'd
I love
love
it.
to help
That
you.
sounds great.
Mhm. Yeah,
Last question, do you teach the communication model as well? The
I do.
PCM? You teach it?
I'm a fully certified teacher in the process communication model. So the process is really quite straightforward. People fill out the survey and they get their profile. And I just ran 15 of them for a group of people. And the profile's really quite in depth. So it's like up to 35 pages long
Wow.
for
Wow.
each. Like it's a very, very in depth profile. PCM, because of the variations, there's like 4,320 versions of
Wow.
this profile. So it's a
Wow.
very in-depth evaluation, and you may have done others, but probably not one that goes into this state
Yeah.
of depth. And then from there, we move into one of two models. I either work with teams and you can get fully trained in PCM, or I do one-on-one coaching with people to help them elevate to wherever they need to go. And yeah, it's fantastic.
So is there
It's
a difference between being trained versus train the trainer? Like if there was somebody who wanted to become PCM
the
trainer
train the
themselves,
trainer.
can
So
do that?
to get your train the trainer certification, it starts with you need to complete your profile PCM level 1, PCM level 2 with a trainer. So I can
Okay.
take you through that. And then we hand you over to Kaler Communications, who is the owner. So KB
Right.
Kaler developed this, and you end up in the train the trainer training. The train the trainer training takes a few months because we want to make sure that people truly understand how to recognize these patterns, how to
Mhm.
show all of these patterns effectively in the training, be able to deal with the different stress that happens within the training. But I will say it's a fascinating training and you get to meet really incredible people. And so when I took that training, um, over, I, yeah, graduated a year ago now in that train the trainer, we had people from France. We had people from who were in HR, who were all teachers who in a school system
Oh, wow.
in Arizona who had learned it 20 years ago and said it was their best training they ever took as a teacher, which was really cool. We had several people in HR positions using it to help with their teams and build better communication within their corporations. And then we had individual coaches. Oh, and there's a psychologist in Montreal who was training in it for couples therapy. So
Wow.
like everything
Couples
from
therapy. I love it. I mean, that's
yeah,
really amazing. I know
yeah.
you have to go, so I won't keep you much longer, but I think we need to have a conversation again. And I think one thing would be really cool to talk about stress. And
Oh,
so
yes.
that's such a topic and how all of this can help to alleviate some of the stress. So maybe we can put that down in the future sometime, Nancy.
Yeah. Sounds
Awesome.
great.
Thank you.
Well, I have enjoyed this immensely
Me
and I
too.
look forward to our future communication.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much.